Maat, the central and perhaps most important concept of pharaonic Egypt, one of the greatest achievements of Egyptian culture: justice, order and balance, and truth. As an all-encompassing cosmic force, it constantly puts in order the universe created by the gods. It's a delicate, primordial harmony that must be constantly nurtured, maintained, and established. Maat is an order that promises durability and endurance, so it plays a central role in the transition to the other world, to eternal life. Maat is also a political order, establishing social justice among people, liberating them from brutal violence and the law of the stronger. She is unifying justice. The state exists because of Maat. The gods established the position of the king to perform Maat on earth, calm the two lands, and drive away evil from them. Maat performed in word and deed also becomes life wisdom, but above all, as we will see today, Maat is the true face of Egyptian religion. Hello everyone, my name's Irena. Welcome to my channel Ancient Sites Girl. I invite you to a podcast about the history of ancient Egypt. This time I'll try to introduce you to the ancient concept of Maat, probably the most enduring element of Egyptian culture, present at least from the early dynastic times to late antiquity. As usual, we'll use original ancient Egyptian sources. Any attempt to translate the single word Maat seems to be inadequate. It's an abstract concept, encompassing cosmic order and balance, as well as divine law, but also human law and justice, morality, unity and prosperity of the state, piety and worship. Maat is at the very center of the Egyptian vision of the world. It is truth and all that is right and good. One could therefore call the religion of pharaonic Egypt the religion of Maat, or more broadly, the culture of pharaonic Egypt was the culture of Maat. Since the hieroglyphic writing didn't use vowels in order to learn the original vocalization of this word, researchers used Akkadian cuneiform records of the names of the pharaohs, who, as we know, eagerly referred to Maat. For example, the throne name of Ramesses the Great was Usar-mat-ra, Setepenra. That is, the justice of Ra is powerful, chosen by Ra. The name of Hatshepsut, who reigned 200 years earlier, was Maat-Kare. Truth is the Ka-soul of Ra. So it's through cuneiform records, as well as later Coptic writings, that is believed that the word was originally pronounced Muwat, with the letter T as the feminine ending. The verb ma meant to lead, to direct, to judge, but also to offer. Maat was written in various ways, using different hieroglyphic signs, but usually the writing included a schematically depicted ostrich feather, the true symbol of Maat. The feather, a general symbol of holiness, symbolized air and wind, and was also one of the attributes of the god Shu, the first creation of the great demiurge Atum. Shu symbolizing dry air and the atmosphere separating the earth from the heavens, together with his sister Tefnut, moisture, were the first pair of gods, from which the earth and the heavens were born. Air was created at the very beginning of creation, the first time, Septepi. Ancient Tefnut represented its opposite aspects. Pharaonic texts emphasized the windy nature of Maat, inhaled like the air necessary for life, an immaterial, invisible substance, omnipresent and all-encompassing. According to the widely accepted in ancient Egypt, almost canonical Heliopolitan version of the creation of the world, When the self-born Atum stood on the first land, the mythical Mount Benben, that emerged from the vastness of the primeval dark and barren ocean, Nun, he gave out his first breath and his first fluids. Depending on the version of the myth, these were either saliva, vomit, or seed. Then he gave birth to their first children, air and moisture, as well as Heka, a magical power necessary for creating the universe. Shu himself was sometimes identified with this power. His mythical sister and wife Tefnut, although essential for giving birth to subsequent gods, only the creator Atum himself didn't need a female counterpart, was initially a secondary figure in cosmogony. In time, however, when in accordance with the solar theology, the pharaoh, the son of the sun, amun-ra, began to be identified with the god Shu, Tefnut was also given a new, special meaning. In the funerary texts of the Middle Kingdom from 4,000 years ago, known as the coffin texts, we find an interesting fragment, the so-called spell 80. Quote, "Thus said Atum, Tefnut is my living daughter, and she shall be with her brother Shu. Living One is his name. Maat is her name. I live with my 2 children, I live with my 2 fledglings, for I am in the midst of them. Both of them follow after my body, and I lie down and live with my daughter Maat, one within me and one behind me. I stand up because of them both, their arms being about me." Thus, Shu is life and Tefnut is Maat. In the same text, we come across a dialogue between the creator and the primordial ocean, Nun. Quote, "Thus said Atum to Nu, I am in the flood waters, very tired, and my limbs are helpless. It is Geb who lives and lifts up my heart. He feeds my heart. He has gathered together the very tired limbs of my heart." Nu said to Atum, "Kiss your daughter Maat, lay her by your nose, that your heart may live, for she will not be far from you. Maat is your daughter, and your son is Shu, whose name lives. Eat of your daughter Maat." Tefnut, the mother of the gods, the life-giving moist wind from the north as described in the pharaonic texts, the goddess of life. Her mysterious nature defines the nature of Maat. Furthermore, the placement of Maat at the very beginning of creation is the recognition of divine law as natural law and objective truth. Interestingly, some researchers see in the spell 80 a theological similarity to the Christian Holy Trinity. The Creator, the Father God Atum, releases from himself life and truth, the dynamic creative power, and Maat, which gives direction and boundaries to unlimited movement. Maat, like a delicate net, ties together the constantly expanding universe. Both Shu, Tefnut, Heka, and Maat are only aspects of the Creator, as according to some researchers, all Egyptian gods. As such, Maat was permanently linked to the king as given by the will of God's spouse. The pharaoh is thus the living one and the beloved of Maat, and the perpetuation of creation was, according to the ancient Egyptians, one of his most important tasks. The pharaoh isn't another despot, but a ruler directly responsible to both Maat and Ra, even if he uses the title of Son of God or even Living God. His role is greater than that of all other sun worshippers put together. The king is the one who brings Maat, who publicly makes an offering of Maat to the sun with whom, according to Heliopolitan theology, the Creator was identified, the great god Atum-Ra. According to spell 80 of the coffin text and other Egyptian records, amun-ra feeds on Maat, absorbing it sometimes with a breath, sight, kiss, or simply swallowing it. So he feeds on Maat, which the pharaoh brings him as a sacrifice. Providing Maat is therefore one of the most important duties of the king, entitled as the one who brings her. The pharaoh is essential to maintaining the process of creation. He is one of the pillars of creation, who delivers Maat, made on earth, to its hungry defenders, gods, who heroically struggle with the forces of chaos, powerful gods who, however, need the support of people, so that the sun can rise again in the morning, so that the endless cosmic waters of Nun will not force the heavenly shield, the celestial body of the goddess of the sky Nut, supported high above the earth by her great father Shu. Every day and every night in the heavens an epic battle takes place between the defenders of creation and the forces of chaos, among others represented by the cosmic serpent Apep, the enemy of the sun and all creation, personifying the destructive aspect of the primeval ocean in Nun. More Maat means less chaos. The Egyptians were aware of the great responsibility they had for the survival of the universe. They didn't distinguish between Maat in life, social and political order, balance, truth in interpersonal relations, and Maat which established order and balance in the cosmos. It was the same Maat, all-encompassing, omnipresent force. The fate of the universe depended largely on their behavior, even in their personal lives. Daily sacrifices from Maat were among the most important elements of the religion of Maat. They were based on a kind of reciprocity. The gods were given back a gift previously received from them. It was particularly important to provide Maat to the sun, as it was the source of its vital force. That is, it was the Ka of the sun that kept it alive. Interestingly, this is evidenced by the throne name of the famous Hatshepsut, Maat-Kare. Maat is the Ka of Ra. As a cosmic ordering force, Maat is often depicted, especially in the New Kingdom, 16th to 11th centuries BC, in personal form as a goddess. She was portrayed as a beautiful woman, always wearing a diadem decorated with a feather. Depictions of the winged Maat are particularly popular in the New Kingdom tombs. In a protective gesture, she embraces the royal cartouches with her multicolored wings. It's these depictions that are usually seen by visitors entering the royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings in western Thebes. This goddess, Maat, although equipped with all the divine attributes, wasn't the object of worship of the ancient Egyptians, who were aware of her primary role as a universal, cosmic force, a law that applies not only to themselves, but also to the gods. It was clear that Maat was more than just another goddess, hence we won't find her temples, but only a few chapels dedicated to her various aspects. If Maat were a goddess, then essentially all of Egypt would be her temple. Of course, as she was called into existence at the very beginning of creation, she could be considered the daughter of the creator Atum, who in turn was identified with the sun itself, so in some texts she is called the daughter of Ra, like the mythological Tefnut or Hathor. Maat was also sometimes called the Eye of Ra, a powerful destructive weapon of the sun, imagined among others in the form of Urias, a snake adorning the king's crown. Maat as the Eye of Ra guides rather than destroys. In the hymn to Maat in the Theban tomb of Ramesses VI from the 12th century BC, we read, "Hail, Eye of Ra, with which he lives day by day, before which that god in the back of the shrine trembles, which came forth shining from the forehead of him who begot it. Serpent above the forehead, who came forth from his forehead. You are radiant, you are she who leads him, who proclaims the law for him with the hidden name, who is justified before the Nine. Lady of terror, great loftiness, Maat, by whom Ra is happy, who calms both lands for him, through what she commands the gods." Although Maat as a universal cosmic force was certainly worshipped already in the early dynastic period, in the Old Kingdom it was clearly associated with the solar cult. Sometimes it was shown in a personal form, standing on the prow of a solar bark, as leading, opening the ways for the sun. Maat is the force that gives direction to the course of the sun, and thus directs the entire universe. For the Egyptians, the cosmos was more of a process than a place, as they believed the course of the sun is the cosmos, and Maat regulates its path, steers the solar bark, balances and allows the process to continue. Maat in personal form as a goddess, the crew member of the solar bark, also appears in the Book of the Dead. Quote, "Thou shalt behold Horus standing on the pilot's place in the boat, and Thoth and Maat shall stand one on each side of him." In fact, Maat was so strongly connected with the solar cult that even during the revolutionary rule of Akhenaten, it was spared. Akhenaten, who ruthlessly dealt with the centuries-old religious traditions of Egypt by establishing in the second half of the 14th century BC the cult of the only god, Aten, the solar disk. Of course, Akhenaten's Maat was above all his will. He titled himself as the living Aten, the great one who is in Jubilee, master of all that the Aten encircles, master of heaven, master of the earth, master of the per-Aten in Akhenaten, and the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, the one living on Maat, lord of the two lands, living on Maat, master of regalia, Akhenaten. Apart from the cosmic order of Maat, the living were bound by its social order, Maat as a state-building concept. The state existed so that Maat could prevail on earth, and the guarantor of establishing the divine order was of course the king. The actions of the pharaoh were interpreted as repeating the act of creation, its continuation, precisely through the establishment of Maat. In turn, the institution of the king was established by the creator, so that the pharaoh could realize Maat among the people. Without a king, both the cosmic and social order collapsed. The Ramessid papyrus, Salier I, describes a series of cataclysms caused by the lack of king, and then restoration of order. Quote, "Rejoice, all the land. The good time has come. The Lord, may he live in happiness and health, has revealed himself to all the lands. Maat has returned to its place. All you who are righteous, come and see. Maat has forced iniquity to give way. The wicked have fallen on their faces, the greedy are all despised together. The water stands and does not dry up. The flood rises high. The days are long, the nights have hours. The moon comes at its proper time." The violation of divine law was supposed to have occurred for the first time very early, according to the Osirian myths, somewhere at the end of the first time Zeb Tepi. The god of barrenness, desert and storm, Seth, annihilated his brother Osiris, disturbing Maat for the first time. He thus became the one who brings chaos. The fratricidal act and then the lawless and unjust rule of Set led to great cataclysms. Natural disasters also accompany the rebellion and escape of the daughter of the sun, Tefnut, in the solar myth of the wandering goddess. Her escape from Egypt causes a disruption of the Nile floods and drought. Her return was celebrated in pharaonic Egypt as the return of Maat. Maat, as it was believed, is never lost once and for all. All depravities of the original state and crisis can be stopped by the pharaoh. His power is of a healing nature. His interventions restore the state that existed before the first sin. On the royal inscriptions of all periods, we learn about the new Zeptepi they established. Besides, the pharaohs were particularly keen to compare themselves to their creator, with whom they were probably identified already at the very beginning in pre-dynastic times. Perhaps the concept of Maat was born then, but there is no evidence for such a claim. It seems, however, that Maat could have been originally an ideology justifying the inheritance of power by the chiefs, the first kings over the early prehistoric societies of Egypt. The earliest evidence of the existence of Maat seems to be the name of a king of the second dynasty, Sekhemib-Peren-Maat, from the 28th century BC. This is the Horus name of this early dynastic ruler, his Serek, which contains for the first time in Egyptian history an additional epithet. On the seals of Sekhemib found in Saqqara, we read Peren-Maat, which means house of Maat. The concept of Maat may therefore be much older than the solar cult introduced only in the Pyramid Age. The Old Kingdom, established by Djoser in the 27th century BC, is the triumph of Maat as a state ideology. Especially during the 3rd and 4th dynasties, there was practically no distinction between the terms god and king. Pharaohs such as Djoser, Snefru or Khufu personified the highest creator god himself. All initiative rested in their hands. All action was carried out at their command, and their authority was unquestionable. The pharaoh of the Pyramid Age was the sole owner of Egypt and its inhabitants, and Maat was essentially his will. All higher offices were occupied by the royal family. The hierarchy was therefore predetermined and obvious to everyone. A strongly centralized state set common goals, engaged enormous resources and masses of people in large construction projects, including the construction of the Great Pyramids. The crafts and arts were monopolized by the state. They remained almost entirely in the service of the royal funeral cult and were organized almost like an army. Men working on the pyramid complexes came from all parts of the country, were barracked in the large workers' villages of Giza and sent to work in rotation. Based on archaeological data, it's believed that they worked in good conditions, most likely with a sense of unity and religious duty, perhaps even with enthusiasm. It was probably then that the Egyptians' national identity was shaped: unity, mutuality, solidarity, and following their divine ruler. Future generations were to refer to such attitudes in the following centuries. The ancients perceived the Pyramid Age as the Golden Age, a glorious time. It was during the Old Kingdom that the rules of the canon of proportions in art were established for the sake of order and balance, unity and consistency. Artists in the service of the state created in line with the spirit of Maat. Any manifestations of individualism in art appeared only in times of crisis during the late Old Kingdom and concerned only private commissions. Maat was the principle of durability, continuity, and endless existence. The Egyptians, who were particularly focused on the funeral cult, saw Maat as liberation from death, so they lived in such a way as to inscribe themselves in the social memory to gain the love of their fellow men, who would take care of the cult of the deceased so that their grave would be respected and their name remembered. The best means to this end was, of course, a monumental tomb. The only chance to have it was faithful service to the king. The beautifully decorated interiors of the mastabas of the late Old Kingdom show scenes of the triumph of Maat over chaos, Isfet, the constant expansion of the cultivation areas by building canals, extermination of crocodiles and hippopotami that threatened people and domestic animals, the hunting of desert predators that attacked cattle, the capture of wild birds for breeding purposes. In a word, the triumph over the wilderness, symbolizing chaos, building the state in place of wilderness, the constant expansion of Maat. Inscriptions inside the mastabas cult chapels refer to Maat only in short words, such as "I spoke Maat," "I did Maat," or "I served the king who loves Maat." These obvious phrases refer to the state cult of Maat that was realized by the king without whom Maat would disappear and humanity would sink into chaos. The growing crisis of the late Old Kingdom, probably caused by a series of climatic catastrophes and the progressing political disintegration of the state, led to its collapse in the 22nd century BC. The first intermediate period was a dark age in Egyptian history, a time of social unrest, lawlessness, and famine. Nomarchs, independent of Memphis, ruled conflicted with each other small states like pharaohs, not always justly. It was then that for the first time the country and its inhabitants faced the absence of Maat as a centralist state ideology. With the fall of the old order came a time of doubt and even open criticism, which resulted in the flourishing of literature of protest. Social solidarity and protection of the weaker became the subject of the treaties of the time, but the word Maat itself was avoided and became a kind of taboo. The warlike rulers of Thebes from the 11th dynasty in the 21st century BC united the country, rebuilt the empire, and most importantly, like the mythological Horus triumphing over Seth, restored Maat, which not only returns as the state ideology of the Middle Kingdom, but reaches its climax. But this isn't the old Maat, something evident, apparent, the divine will of the king. Now the Egyptians have to constantly strive for the new order, fight for it. It was the time of famous moral treatises, poetic texts dealing with the need for solidarity and cooperation. Traumatized authors of the Middle Kingdom were returning to the times of the first intermediate period as a warning. A perfect example is The Tale of the Eloquent Peasant from the 12th dynasty, found in the Theban Ramesseum. It tells the story of a certain inhabitant of an oasis who, while leading donkeys, encounters a nobleman who spreads his robe on the road, thus forcing the peasant to deviate from the road and pass him while riding through a private grain field. This was an excuse for the official to confiscate the unfortunate man's animals and goods that he was carrying for sale. The peasant, protesting against the lawlessness, was also beaten. He went to the local governor for justice. The peasant takes his complaints to the chief steward, delivering speeches so eloquently that he astonishes the official. The chief steward informs his king Nebkaure, who reigns in nearby Heracleopolis, about everything. In order to hear more of beautifully spoken wisdom, they decide to hold the peasant as long as possible, keeping him in uncertainty about the verdict. The resident of the oasis calls out, quote, "Do you expect to live forever? Surely these things are wrong. A balance which tilts, a plummet which errs, a precise and honest man who becomes a deceiver. Behold, Maat flees from you, driven from her throne. Nobles perpetrate crimes, and rectitude of speech is overturned. Judges steal what has already been stolen, and he who can twist a matter in just the right way can make a mockery of it. He who supplies the winds languishes on the ground. He who refreshes the nostrils now causes men to gasp. The arbiter is now a thief, and he who should quell distress is one who creates its origin. The town is flooded with wrong." The humble peasant makes bold complaints to the higher officials so that divine law can return to Egypt. As the Egyptians believed, order and balance will come back when not an individual, but the whole society returns to divine law. In a strongly hierarchical Egypt, the ruling class, therefore, bore the greatest responsibility. Quote, "Chief Steward, my lord, you are Ra, the Lord of Heaven, with your attendants. The provisions of all mankind are from you as from the flood. You are happy who makes verdant the fields and revives the desert. Punisher of the thief, defender of the distressed. Become not a raging torrent against the supplicant. Be vigilant against the approach of eternity. Cherish length of life, for, as is the saying, to do Maat is the breath of the nostrils." This is a new meaning of Maat developed in the Middle Kingdom. He who does justice will be rewarded with it both in life and after death. Quote, "Ride the waves so as to do Maat. Be on guard, for you could run aground through the tiller rope. But the stability of the land is to do Maat. Do not utter falsehood, for you are noble. Do not be petty, for you are distinguished. Do not utter falsehood, for you are a balance. Do not go off course, for you are impartiality. Behold, you are the sole one with the balance. If it wavers, then you will waver." The bitter words of the oasis dweller must be heard. No one can be indifferent to the words of truth, regardless of whether he is a dignitary or a peasant. Among the long list of sins of the famous negative confession in the Book of the Dead we find, "I was not deaf to the words of truth." A good man, therefore, had not only to do Maat, speak Maat, but also listen to Maat. Quote, "Be patient so that you may learn Maat. Control your own preference so that the humble petitioner may gain. There is no impetuous man who attains to excellence. There is no impatient man to whom authority is given. Let your eyes see, let your heart be instructed. Do not be tyrannical in your power, that evil may not overtake you." The Egyptians attached great importance to the power of words, both good and bad. Insult, slander, and calumny were treated as equal to deeds. They protected themselves from slander by praying to the gods. The pharaoh himself was ritually protected from it. They believed that since truth gives life, a lie brings death. Gentle manners and general friendliness were therefore an important element in doing and receiving Maat, and in this way building social order, unity and solidarity. One of the most famous moral treatises of ancient Egypt can be found on several papyri from different periods, the Maxims of Ptahhotep copied and studied by the ancients, were supposed to come from the 6th dynasty, but this isn't settled. According to many researchers, it's another didactic text of the Middle Kingdom from the 12th dynasty. At that time, references to the Old Kingdom were often made to create colorful, often fantastic stories about famous pharaohs from the past, about the times of the builders of the Great Pyramids. This text was supposed to have been written by the old retiring vizier Ptahhotep and addressed to his son of the same name, who was expecting to take over his father's duties as the highest official in the service of the pharaoh. Interestingly, I admired their magnificent neighboring mastabas in Saqqara many times myself, so they were undoubtedly historical figures. The Maxims of Ptahhotep is a kind of etiquette manual. The old vizier's good advice was read by nobles, members of the upper classes, even during the New Kingdom. He refined prosaic advice useful in everyday life, such as, if you come up against an aggressive adversary, a man of low standing, one who is not your equal, do not assail him in accordance with his lowly estate. Leave him be, and he will confound himself. We can also find their more significant wisdom. Quote, if you are a ruler responsible for the concerns of the populace, search for every opportunity to do good, so that there may be no shortcoming in your actions. Great is Maat, and its foundation is firmly established. It has not been shaken since the time of Osiris, and he who violates the laws must be punished. The vizier advises his successor to act morally, to do Maat in his office. At the same time, he warns him against a sinful, improper inner life and against mistakes in building relationships with the loved ones, so that he is also the one who accepts Maat. He has a particular aversion to greed, which destroys interpersonal relationships, community and solidarity, on which the divine social order is based. Here are some of the many pieces of advice Ptahhotep gave to his son. Guard yourself against the blemish of greediness, for it is a grave affliction of an incurable disease, and those who fall into it cannot recover. It creates dissension among fathers, mothers, and maternal brothers. He who obeys his heart will keep everything in order. Be generous as long as you live, for what goes out from the storehouse does not go back in. And men are eager for bread which is freely given. He whose stomach is empty is an accuser, and such an opponent becomes a bringer of woe. Punish soundly and reprimand thoroughly, for the restraint of evil will reinforce morality. Behold, a good son who is given by God is one who exceeds what was told him by his master. He will perform Maat, for his heart will have controlled his actions. I enjoyed 110 years of life given to me by the king, and honors surpassing those of my predecessors. All of this came to pass because of my doing Maat for the king, until I reached the state of veneration. Maat was what united generations of Egyptians over the centuries, even millennia. It was one of the permanent elements, almost unchanged, while new theological trends conquered Egypt. Already in the 5th dynasty, a new, mysterious cult of Osiris was introduced at the Memphite court. Osiris became the new god of the dead and replaced the ancient Anubis in this role. He was included as a central figure in the traditional founding myth of Egypt, that is, the fight between Horus and Set, as well as in the solar myths associated with the funeral cult, as evidenced by the pyramid texts that appeared in the 24th century BC. The new religion of Osiris makes an incredible career in the difficult times of the first intermediate period, and at the threshold of the Middle Kingdom, it's already followed by the masses. In times of chaos, disunity, and the absence of a single king ruling over the two lands, Osiris largely takes over his role, a king who defeats death, rises from the dead, while guaranteeing the rebirth of the land. The cyclicality of the Nile floods disrupted, as we know, at the end of the Old Kingdom. However, the religion of Osiris is much more. It promises eternal life to all people, not just the rulers. The Egyptians learn that, like the rulers, have Ba soul capable of traveling to the afterlife. Instead of only lasting, hiding in their graves with their Ka, they can achieve true immortality, like gods, live forever in a land of happiness in the fields of reeds, somewhere far away among the stars, where the sun sails in its nocturnal bark. Of course, only a pharaoh or a god can enjoy such eternal life. However, this isn't an obstacle, since anyone can be reborn in the dead god, King Osiris. Everyone can become god after death. This is a real revolution that will change everything, and above all, funeral rites. However, one thing remains unchanged. The condition for the souls to undertake the dangerous journey through Duat, the kingdom of Osiris, is to live in accordance with Maat. Despite the new groundbreaking concept of Ba, as is the case with the ancient Egyptians, the earlier beliefs are not questioned. The deceased, both in the form of a mummified and spiritual body, that is, Ket and Sah, still inhabits the tomb. The tomb still maintains the presence of his name, Ren. However, as an almost divine being, Ba leaves the tomb and enters the land of the dead. The coexisting concepts of the soul mean its multiplicity of aspects. Ba, a mobile soul, endowed with exceptional features such as shape-shifting, the ability to fly, must go through many dangerous stages in the afterlife, pass the test, survive. Numerous funeral texts inform us about this. However, its main challenge, the condition of immortality, is the justification of the deceased at the judgment of Osiris. The idea of the judgment of the dead wasn't new. In the Old Kingdom, it was believed that the deceased could be brought to court. The dead judge still performed his function, and the pharaohs judged the inhabitants of the cities of the dead, the cemeteries surrounding their pyramids. The wicked tomb robbers are judged before God by the deceased owners of the robbed tombs, as the justice of Maat was binding on the living and the dead. At the judgment of Osiris, however, the deceased isn't confronted with an opponent, but only with the general principle of Maat. This is a court before which everyone must stand, and its verdict is absolute and irrevocable. The stakes are high. Immortality. Man of the Old Kingdom was content only with continuing to exist after death, of course if he did Maat. Maat itself was the principle of continuity and durability. Whoever followed it became imperishable. Thanks to a good life, respect for the community, solidarity, and the love he showed, he can continue to exist on Earth, because he receives gifts in his cult chapel. His Ka is fed, his loved ones remember him, and thanks to their tomb, his name lasts forever. However, his continued existence is largely conditioned by the cult of the deceased, that is, by the living. The religion of Osiris, on the other hand, promised the Egyptians unconditional immortality regardless of the attitude of the living. The living have no influence on the immortality of the souls of their loved ones, but in cult chapels they can still feed hungry souls wandering the duat. The final fate of the deceased was solely in his hands. As one can easily notice, while in the mastabas of the Old Kingdom the main motive of decoration is the endless processions of offerings to the deceased, in later tombs, for example those of the New Kingdom, images of gods and spells taken from funeral books are omnipresent. The deceased is above all alone in the afterlife. His hope is the secret knowledge of the duat recorded in funeral texts, knowledge of spells and prayers, but above all, the purity of his heart, according to the Osirian religion, the carrier of Maat. In order for the deceased to become an immortal god, Osiris, his heart had to be filled with Maat. In connection with this new theology, already at the end of the Old Kingdom, heart-shaped amulets appear, and hearts left in mummies were protected by specific spells and talismans. As a special part of the soul referred to as Ib, the heart showed the truth about himself, regardless of the will of the deceased. In the Book of the Dead, we read, "I feed on Maat, I exist through it. I am Horus in the heart amidst the entrails. I feed on what I say. My heart exists, let it not be stolen. My heart belongs to me, let it not be harmed. I feed on Maat, I eat Maat." He who rejects Maat harms his heart, as they said. It concerns more the inner conscience of man than the co-creation of the social order. It was a completely new, transcendent model of Egyptian spirituality. According to the Book of the Dead, the most popular funeral text from the New Kingdom, practically to Roman times, the deceased entering the abode of Osiris, the Hall of Maat, before reciting a negative confession in front of the members of the divine tribunal, addresses, as if with a pre-confession, directly to the god of the dead, Osiris, the Lord of Maat. Quote, "In truth I have come unto thee, I have brought Maat to thee, I have done away sin for thee. I have not committed sins against men, I have not opposed my family and kinsfolk, I have not acted fraudulently in the seat of truth. I have not known men who were of no account. I have not wrought evil. I have not made it to be the first consideration daily that unnecessary work should be done for me. I have not brought forward my name for dignities. I have not attempted to direct servants. I have not belittled God. I have not defrauded the humble man of his property. I have not done what the gods abominate. I have not vilified a slave to his master. I have not inflicted pain. I have not caused anyone to go hungry. I have not made any man to weep. I have not committed murder. I have not given the order for murder to be committed. I have not caused calamities to befall men and women. I have not plundered the offerings in the temples. I have not defrauded the gods of their cake offerings. I have not carried off the fenkukates offered to the spirits. I have not committed fornication. I have not masturbated in the sanctuaries of the god of my city. I have not diminished from the bushel. I have not filched land from my neighbor's estate and added it to my own acre. I have not encroached upon the fields of others. I have not added to the weights of the scales. I have not depressed the pointer of the balance. I have not carried away the milk from the mouths of children. I have not driven the cattle away from their pastures. I have not snared the geese in the goose pens of the gods." I'm almost done. I have not caught fish with bait made of the bodies of the same kind of fish. I have not stopped water when it should flow. I have not made a cutting in a canal of running water. I have not extinguished a fire when it should burn. I have not violated the times of offering the chosen meat offerings. I have not driven away the cattle on the estates of the gods. I have not turned back the god at his appearances. I am pure. I am pure. I am pure. Nothing could be hidden in the presence of Maat, and the inevitability of Osiris' judgment was a metaphysical guarantor of earthly morality. Each of the listed sins against Maat was known to all Egyptians. The actual negative confession, addressed to the 42 gods, the assessors of Maat, consisted of 42 sins. There were therefore twice as many of them as in the so-called pre-confession. Don't worry, I'm not gonna list them now. Sins were called doing Isfet. This term means the opposite of Maat. It can be understood as chaos and injustice, doing evil. Negative confession is the renunciation of Isfet by observing prohibitions, the breaking of which threatens the loss of a person's purity, the purity of his heart, but also weakens Maat as a general cosmic principle, so it's a crime against the Creator and all creation. Hence, there's no mercy for sinners whom the Book of the Dead calls enemies of Osiris. The decisive moment of judgment, according to the Book of the Dead, is of course the weighing of the deceased's heart. Numerous colorful vignettes of papyrus copies of the book depict these scenes very literally. They show a grim Anubis as the guardian of the scales, who places the deceased's heart on one scale and Maat's feather on the other. If the heart is heavier than Maat's feather, it means that all declarations of innocence made by the deceased are lies. As an enemy of Osiris, he must therefore be destroyed immediately. His continued existence is a weakening of Maat, also as a force maintaining the universe in balance. The sinner's heart is devoured, and the soul perishes in hellish torments in the place of annihilation. The divine recorder, the god of wisdom Thoth, also known as Master of Maat, who is present at the weighing of the heart, records and announces the result of the weighing. If it's favorable for the deceased, he is called Ma-khero, true of voice, or justified. In the vignettes of the Book of the Dead, we see the joy of the deceased, who becomes Ma-khero, raises both hands in a triumphant gesture. In each hand and on the head, the deceased has Maat feathers. In this triumphant attire, he is led before the face of the Lord of Maat, Osiris, who allows him to live in paradise, in the field of reeds. Although the afterlife seems chaotic and incomprehensible at first glance, it is Maat that triumphs here. Evil is destroyed, good is rewarded, and the inhabitants of Duat, even the most terrifying, guard Maat, and their actions also serve the continuation of Maat on earth. The New Kingdom was a time of gradual degradation of the old position of Maat as the supreme cosmic force and the primordial law binding gods and people. Subsequent rulers of Egypt whose right to rule could be questioned, such as Hatshepsut, Horemheb, and especially the first Ramessids, legitimized their power by referring more and more often to divine will, a construction somewhat more flexible than the predetermined order of Maat. Whether called amun-ra or Amun, the great God creator, establishes in his grace the pharaoh as his pious servant. The position of the pharaoh, even if he deifies himself during his lifetime, as in the case of Ramesses the Great or Ramesses III, in the theological sense, weakens substantially. In time, it's no longer the pharaoh who realizes Maat, but the gods who take care of justice by punishing and rewarding everyone individually. In place of socio-religious concept of Maat, full of subtle, mutual dependencies, the state idea centered around the pharaoh. A new type of religiosity appears in the New Kingdom. Internal piety, an individual, personal relation with the Creator God. It gradually leads to the loosening of old interpersonal bonds and the growth of the importance of the clergy, especially the priest of Amun in the late New Kingdom, serving the cult and the famous oracle in Karnak. The cult of Amun, which cultural and political importance was constantly growing in Egypt, which partially contributed to the fall of the New Kingdom and the disintegration of unity of the Egyptian state. Nevertheless, Maat remained an essential element of Egyptian spirituality until late antiquity, eventually giving way to the second great religious doctrine of Egypt, Christianity. It's worth remembering today what this extraordinary, complex and rich concept was, which occupied the minds and hearts of Egyptians for thousands of years. The idea of Maat was perfectly summarized by the German Egyptologist Siegfried Morenz. Let's listen. Maat is the right state of nature and society, established in the act of creation and henceforth perceived, depending on circumstances, as what is right and what is proper, as well as law, order, justice, and truth. This state must be in every regard, in matters great and small, protected or introduced, so that Maat, which was established in the first place as the right order, becomes the goal and task of human action. I hope you learned something new about the beliefs of ancient Egyptians. Thank you for listening. Please let me know in the comments what you'd like to hear about next time. I'd also like to thank all my patrons. Thank you so much, you're simply beyond. If you don't support me yet, but would like to, I placed my Patreon link below in the description. Don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye and see you on the next one.